Welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Bohumer. This is episode number 13. Thanks for joining us. Shout out to our new listeners. We've had a ton in February. Welcome aboard. As always, check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsmadesimple.com, which has some incredible material on IoT. And as always, kindly subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service. Tonight, we're changing up the format just a little bit for this episode. I ended up with a ton of great ideas for mini episodes, and I couldn't do them all. So I decided to shake it up a little bit and put a bunch of them into a single episode instead. I hope you don't mind. So think of it as changing from our traditional appetizer main course format, and now we're moving into more of a 5-course chef menu instead. We'll do our best to keep it in and around 30 minutes. So those 5 topics include GPS's Y2K moment, Cat-M tracking the previously untrackable, our Ring and other smart doorbells invading everyone's privacy without you knowing, is IoT and automation dividing the workforce into 2, worsening the inequality gap, and finally, are drones signaling the end of the guard dog as we know it. To start, for anyone under 30, you may have minimal recollection about Y2K. You might have been a child, or maybe you weren't paying attention to all the warnings of how the world was going to come to an end. I was in the early stages of my career, working on some mobile-related projects. I remember the frantic pace of upgrade that went on that year. I have never seen anything like it since. So, was all the money spent on Y2K wasted? You can never say that, as getting faster pieces of equipment likely resulted in a higher level of productivity, but it definitely caused businesses to move forward with some purchases much sooner than they would have wanted to. It seems that the GPS system, the thing that tells you where the closest Starbucks or where your Uber driver might be, it's having its own Y2K moment. And like the first one, are you prepared? Many of you might say, what's going on? I haven't heard this. It hasn't exactly been big in the news. What is the issue? Very similar to when computers were invented, about how they didn't plan on devices being in the field for that long. When GPS was invented, developers didn't envision that GPS units would be in service longer than 10 to 15 years, so they programmed them to roll over in 1,024 weeks. April 6, 2019, mark that date on your calendar. That's the 1,024th week. And unless your GPS module and or your application has accounted for the rollover, the date will not be reported accurately after that day. Is the whole world going to come to an end? No, this is definitely fixable. The good news is that many applications don't use the GPS chipset for the accurate date in the first place, and the accurate time, which is used much more by GPS chipsets, is not affected at all. What should you do? Well, first you want to start contacting, and who you contact depends on who you bought the machine from. If your company was the one that made the device, and you designed it into your product, you're going to want to call or contact the manufacturer of the chipset. If you bought an end product, you're going to want to contact the person who made your product, or at least the person you bought it from anyways. Chances are there's patches available in either scenario to help you prevent any downtime. As a bit of a shameless plug, if I may, you can definitely reach out to Novatech for help, even if you didn't buy your product from us. And the best way to do that is to send us an email to sales@novatech.com. On to number 2. When I say the word untrackable, a few things might come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind to me is Jason Bourne, running through different parts of Europe, how they could never find him. That's not what I'm talking about here. First, before I go into this, I do want to point out that 2G and 3G could always have been used for backbones for any tracking solution. So I don't want people to yell at me saying, you're talking about things we could have been tracking for a long time. Yes, you could have. However, the complexity and cost of these 2 technologies very much limited what could be tracked to more expensive items, cars, boats, generators, those kind of things. Cat-M changes the game as it lowers cost, speed, and power consumption. That's going to open up this market much, much more. So first, by lowering speeds, it eliminates something that most tracking solutions did not need, quick data speeds. You didn't need 4G speeds that you would use for video when you were tracking the location of an item. You just need to know the GPS coordinates, perhaps the speed and a couple other variables. That was it. Bits and bytes was good enough. So that extra bandwidth was definitely wasted. And by lowering down speed to taking out what you didn't need, it's going to remove a lot of unnecessary components. And that's going to lower down the overall cost. And that kind of makes sense. When you take out components, stuff tends to cost a little less. The other thing that happens when you take out components is you reduce the power drain, and that's going to dramatically increase the battery life. And that's going to make it more feasible. A lot of times these trackers had to be a certain size, often because of the battery. If you can shrink the battery by 20 or 50%, that makes the package much smaller. So in addition to being cheaper, you can fit it into more places. What are some of the things that might have been untrackable before, at least financially feasible to be trackable using cellular based on cost alone? I have 5 main categories here. You could have this list being 100 things. So if I don't name what you're trying to track, don't assume it can't be tracked. The first area is low-cost industrial equipment. So take things like pumps and valves and rental equipment. They may not move, but you might have wanted to monitor them. Perhaps you wanted to look after them for being stolen. In the case of rental equipment, maybe you wanted to know the level of diesel fuel on board. It made sense. If it's a multi-million-dollar machine, you're always going to track that. Cellular was an easy justification then. But if you're talking about a machine that's a couple $1,000s, it didn't always make sense to track it. And that's why you're starting to see CAD-M changing that. The second area is consumer-grade medical equipment. Take like a blood pressure machine, maybe a portable EKG machine, maybe a CPAP machine, and 28,000 other ones. So yes, a lot of them were tracked, but they tended to be done in 2 ways. One was it was Bluetooth, and you're expecting the end user to track it. Or in the case of cellular, it was done, but it was done using 3G, so it kind of made it more cost prohibitive. You're going to see CAD-M change that. So you're going to see CAD-M become the default standard for this kind of medical equipment pretty quickly, I would think. The third area is never really been tracked, and that's what I refer to as non-powered equipment. There's many, many examples of non-powered equipment. I have 3 that are kind of unique. The first is a porta potty, and you might wonder, again, do people really steal those? No, but they do get tipped over. They do run out of supplies. The second one is industrial fencing. So say you have a site which you have a lot of valuable material on. The first sign that somebody's on the site might be that the fence moves. With these fences, there's nothing to plug into. They're not powered. Anything you put onto them had to be battery powered. And as I spoke about, CAD-M is going to reduce the battery consumption needs, which makes it more viable to track some of these things. The third one is warehouse skids. I was shocked when some customers told me just how much fun they have tracking these things around the warehouse. And it's because if you take a big company like, say, a Walmart, the majority of the skids aren't theirs. They have to return them. What happens is the company says, give me back skid number 450, and they have no idea where it is. And that either made them pay a penalty or spend time looking for it. The biggest competitor now to CAD-M would be Sigfox. And Sigfox works beautifully for this solution, assuming you have coverage. And that was a major issue. Sigfox could be used here if you have coverage in the area. The fourth main category is package and shipment tracking. And yes, if you were shipping that proverbial bag of diamonds, you were going to track it. However, on a less valuable one, it might not have made sense. And especially, I was saying, if the trackers were too big physically, it didn't justify the package size. As the cost comes down with CAD-M, you're going to be able to track more and more shipments. You're going to see more trackers put into skids, for instance, of shipments kind of buried in. You might even see them put into documents that are very valuable. The fifth category has to do with stuff that's often used on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and that's in-home or in-office machinery and appliances, fridge, stove, HVAC unit. And you might wonder, well, those things are used in a home. Fridges aren't likely to be stolen. They're not likely to be moved, so they don't need GPS. Why wouldn't you just use Bluetooth if you're connecting to a phone or a Wi-Fi? And don't get me wrong, that's a very valid option, but that comes with 2 issues. Consumers don't feel the need to establish or maintain a connection for devices if they don't see a value in the data coming from it. So you have your Fitbit, for instance, you're going to want to connect it. The whole point is to be able to upload your steps and your activity and your heart rate and to share it with social media. It makes sense. You're going to make sure your Fitbit is always connected. I'm not sure about your fridge, though. Yeah, you might do it once where you're going to log on and say, what's the status of my eggs? How many do I have in the house? You're going to do that once, and then you're going to be bored by it. and then it's going to fall off the network and you're not going to bother to reconnect it again. That's very common. And what happens then is that the other benefactor of the IoT data is the manufacturer of that fridge. They're going to want to know uptime, how their compressors are working. Is there any issues with software? If you're not connecting it, they're not getting that data. And that kind of sucks for them. What happens then is that the fridge manufacturer might say, you know what, I'm just going to put cellular inside. I'm not going to worry about the person connecting it. This way I can always get my data. And if they want to learn about their egg status and, emergencies for milk, they can get that updates themselves. The second issue is that people that use some of these devices, so now let's focus on the healthcare ones like EKG and CPAP. Let's face it, it's not the average 21-year-old using these. It's usually someone a little older, 45 plus, often in their 80s and 90s. These people aren't exactly tech savvy. Some of them are, I guess, but not in general. They might not have a smartphone. They may not have a Wi-Fi network at all. And if they do, it might be set up by their kids, so they don't know how to add a user anyways to it. Or there might be coverage issues, say up in the bedroom where you would set up one of these machines. Cellular connectivity allows for a much easier setup, and that's just much cleaner to work with. As the cost of cellular IoT hardware, and correspondingly the airtime as well, falls with each new generation, expect this trend to accelerate much faster. When we come back from a short break, we will ask the questions, do Ring and other smart doorbells invade your privacy and those around you? Is IoT and automation further dividing the workforce into two? And will drones signal the end of the guard dog as we know it? Back in 5 seconds. Okay, welcome back. So first I'll start by saying I'm a serious online shopper. I use my Amazon account a lot, Best Buy, and a number of other ones. I just avoid shopping in stores whenever I can. And it's not that people in stores aren't doing a good job. I just don't like the experience. Driving there, finding a parking spot, wandering around, trying to find things, standing in line. Although I do use the automatic checkout if it's open. So whenever possible, I avoid the store like the plague. I buy almost everything online. So much so that I think not only do I know the names of the couriers that come to my house, I think I even know the names of their kids at this point. The reason why I can pull this off is I work from home. I'm here to answer the door when the packages come. Most people don't have that luxury. And this has led to a big growth in what I refer to as a serious lazy-ass crime, if you ask me, and that is porch theft. I mean, you're following around a frickin' truck. How do you train for this? What do you follow around the ice cream truck when you're a kid and realize it's something you want to do? Anyways, I digress. To prevent porch theft and to help protect their home and their family, millions have gone to video doorbells. And they're great. Don't get me wrong, we have one. I can see what's going on and I can answer from downstairs if I can't get up there. It's great. But have you ever given any thought as to what happens to the video feed after it leaves your home? It goes to a cloud, but do you ever wonder what's going on with it? Most don't. For the most part, these doorbells offer, as I mentioned, a cloud-based service. And that's great. It allows you to view from just about anywhere, on any device. People don't know you're not home. Very convenient. But are others viewing your data without you knowing? It's not like big technology companies have the best record of protecting our data, right? Yes, Facebook, I mean you. So you might ask, it's just viewing my front yard. That's kind of public domain. Everyone can see my front yard. What's the big deal? And if you look at it from that very simplistic view, you're absolutely right. But have you considered a few things? Is your camera picking up your neighbor's home? Are you peeping into their windows without realizing it? And I say that because I didn't realize I was aiming it so far, and I got to see my neighbors having a fight one time on the camera, so kind of interesting. So you're potentially invading their privacy as well. Is your feed sufficiently protected from hackers who may wish to learn your patterns to know when you're not home? This could be your fault as a starting point. Maybe you've used that, password 123 and someone can hack into your account. That's your fault. But it could also be the issue of the provider. If they haven't sufficiently secured it, and come on, it's not like there's hacks every day on the news of big companies. Are they taking all the precautions they need to protect your data? Most people don't ask. Next, do the police and other authorities have access without your permission or a warrant to view your feed? Most of us don't know. And I don't think I've ever asked that question. Again, it's not a big deal. What are they going to see on my front lawn? That's what you think. but you're going to find out in a second, there is some big issues we haven't addressed. The last one is a great idea in concept, and it's what Ring is doing with this community watch or community programs, whatever you want to call it. And that's why you can flag a particular person and the neighborhood could look out for that person. Again, in concept, great. For that lazy ass guy doing porch theft, I kind of want people to look out for him. So that does make sense. But are you putting innocent people at risk? This all came to light when Amazon filed a patent to put their facial ID software, something we've spoken about in the past, and it hasn't always been on the up and up. The idea was that Amazon wanted to flag suspicious people. Again, not a bad idea. It could be used by the police to flag those with outstanding warrants, maybe a deadbeat dad, a sexual predator, and I think most people are beyond okay with that. No problem. But what if it's used incorrectly? What if someone in the neighborhood watch decides, I hate my ex, that bleep bleep for dumping me. I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to put them onto the suspicious list. Now, all of a sudden, they're flagged as being suspicious, even though they're not doing anything wrong. And that's what my worry is that where could it go from here? What about some of the dreamers that are in the US? Are they going to be flagged this way? What about people for civil lawsuits? You start to wonder now, where do you draw the line? And I'm not the only one asking this question. Civil liberty groups are getting involved, so we definitely have to see where this goes. The next one starts out with a story, and it was from a friend of mine telling me when he found out, I guess he was about 6 or 8 or something, that their family was not rich. They're driving on a freeway, and it happens to have a toll road that runs side by side with it, and the freeway was just packed, but it was free to drive on, so most people drove on it. And the toll road, which was not free, was mostly wide open. So he asked his dad, why aren't we on that road? And his dad answered, rich guys drive that road. We're not rich. So this guy's in his 50s now, so this was 40 odd years ago. And it does show that there's always been some divide between rich and poor in our society, and there always will be. But it's definitely more pronounced now, it seems, than at any other time in the last 60 to 80 years. I have to wonder, have I helped to make this worse? And the reason why I say that, not just specifically me, but I've sold IoT for 2 decades. How much have I contributed indirectly to this divide? Technologies like IoT and automation have helped to create thousands of high-paying engineering and technology jobs. That's great, but they probably come at a cost of many more times that in middle-class positions. Take bank tellers, factory workers, travel agents. That list could be forever. This trend shows no sign of slowing down. Now, what I refer to as software-focused automation, most people think of, Robbie the robot picking up things and moving it over, doing welding, and you can physically see that, and that happens in a lot of warehouses and factories. But a lot of automation now is software-focused. So it's analyzing, it's looking at trends, it's using artificial intelligence combined with IoT to gather data. Is it going to have a similar impact on white-collar jobs? And that's everything from analysts to researchers to financial back-office workers. It already is starting to make an effect, and I think it's going to accelerate. Having said all that, have we truly created 2 different workforces? Those who build the machines, the software, who service them, who do all the different components to it, and those who are looking for work scraps that are currently not being replaced by automation. Now, there's been a big push by the Trump administration to bring back factories to the U.S. Again, I'm not a left-winger or a right-winger. I don't care if you agree with the guy. But I think most of us can agree that the idea of bringing back jobs is admirable. But it fails to address one issue. When a factory does come back, you might think, the factory used to employ 400 people. This town was booming back then. It's all coming back. Well, the factory might come back, but not all 400 jobs are going to come back. Look at a company like Axon. They make those cool tasers and the body-worn cameras that are used by police forces. They used to have 80 very well-paid employees doing all the assembly. Now they have 4 robots. And the worst part is, the 4 robots are far more productive than the 80 people were. So even if that factory comes back, they're not going to hire as many people. Sorry to break it to you. This does seem to contradict all of the big job numbers that you see coming out. 200,000 jobs, 300,000 jobs being created. It's not all nerd jobs, is it? It's not all engineers. There are some jobs that are for the rest of us, are there not? Absolutely. But if you look at the numbers a little closer, they tend to be in much lower paying areas like food service and retail. And that often means that people have to take on 2, 3, 4 jobs just to make ends meet, to make as much as they used to before Robbie the robot came into the factory and took their jobs. And it gets even worse. Those jobs, like the one in food service and the one in retail, are also very likely to be replaced by automation. I did a preview podcast on AI, and I spoke about how in the food service area, robots and machines make perfect hamburgers. And in retail, it's self-checkout. And I did a blog post on Marty the robot, I think his name is. He goes around the grocery store and looks up price checks and looks at different things. You're going to start to see those used more and more. So that kind of comes out to the final question. Where do we go from here? What's the answer to solve this? And I don't have the answer. I'm just here to bring it up to cause a conversation. All of us together have to get together and deliver the answer. Finally, we're going to talk about guard dogs. And first, I love dogs. Even when I'm running and get my headphones on, if I see a dog there that's, breaking the leash to come over and say hi, I usually stop and pet the dog. To me, it's great. I love dogs. And I've often said that humans don't deserve dogs. They're too good for us. But having said that, one of the biggest uses that many people have for a family dog is security. Whether it's going out for a walk in the park, whether it's in their home, people rely on their dogs for protection. And you know what? These lovely animals are going to do whatever they can to protect us. And that's great. The problem is they want to protect you from every danger. And they don't discriminate. Whether it's someone trying to break in, a squirrel, the mailman, someone running by, they don't care. So dogs are kind of the worst for that in terms of they're the ultimate source of false alarms. Similar to dogs, motion sensor systems overreact to just about anything. If you happen to live in a bit more of a rural property and a deer runs by, they freak out and turn all the lights on. People often disable the motion sensors or even turn the sensitivity up so high, it doesn't give you the protection that you need. And in some cases, they just ignore them. The light's on, whatever. It must be Bob in the backyard. Enter in the sunflower system, which is kind of a not very cool name, by the way, for a system that is so cool. But anyway, so I digress. The system has 2 parts. One is the sunflower. And if you haven't seen it, the best way I can describe it, it looks like one of those solar lights you might have in the back patio or on your walkway, with the little stem and the little light and the little solar power on top. That's kind of what it looks like. If it views motion, because it has a motion sensor built into these things, which you wouldn't suspect that if you were a criminal, by the way, it kicks in the really freaking cool part of this. And I almost dropped the F-bomb there because it is so cool. It releases the bee. And the bee is a drone. And what happens is they have this little hive. Another cool name, by the way. Like, what a cool name, bee and hive. Get rid of the sunflower name. But anyways, it releases the bee and the bee comes up. What it looks like, this hive, is one of those electrical boxes that you might see on people's front yard. And it kind of parts open and this really cool drone comes out. So now the drone goes over to where the sunflower identifies the movement. And if it is a deer, this is where AI kicks in. So it knows what a human looks like, a deer, a piece of garbage, whatever it might be. And if it identifies it as being a false alarm, the little bee goes back into its hive and goes back and charges and waits for the next event. If it does identify it as being a potential threat, like a human, what it will do in that case is that it will send you a text or some kind of message along with a video feed. So now you can take a look at it and you can go, oh yeah, that's the gardener. Sorry, I forgot to tell you he was coming in earlier this morning. No big deal. Then it will go back to its hive. But if you say it's a threat, it will stay about 20 to 30 feet above person and fly around. And that way you can contact the police or your security. So this is great. I thought it was a cool solution. It's one of the coolest IoT-based solutions I've ever seen. A few things to know. It's not available yet. It might come out in 2019, but more likely 2020. So it's at least 12 to 18 months out. It's not cheap. You can't buy it from what I've seen. It's going to be a monthly turnkey service. And it's going to be at least a few $100s a month, I guess, depending on how many sunflowers and bees you need. It's first going to be targeted at estate homes. So the rich guys get things first. That tends to be what happened. They're the first ones that got 4K TV too, so it doesn't surprise me. It also might be targeted at some of the gated communities and also perhaps some of the university properties, some basically big spaces. But I do expect this to come out at a much, much lower price point as the technology matures and as drones mature. So you're going to see this eventually for all homes. So thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this 5-course menu episode. Hopefully at least a couple things were of interest to you. Before I go, I wanted to point out that we have a free ebook series. I've been pointing out the ebook series for a few times. Keep on forgetting to mention they're free. What they are is they're chapters from my book that I've enhanced. If you take a topic like transportation, there's about a 30-page ebook there. It's got some cool pictures. It has some interactivity. It has some great material. The idea is to provide some learning experience about this. And there's about 20 different topics. Some of them are business related. Some of them are personal, like health and your home and your car. Hopefully you find them interesting. That's all I have today. Thanks again for listening. I'm Larry Humor. Take care.